Namaste, greetings and blessings, and welcome to the Center for Spiritually Integrated Arts. This is our Sunday message, and I am Reverend Dr. Raymont Anderson, the founder and spiritual director of this center. And I invite you to watch not only this Sunday message, but any of our archived messages. I invite you to join any classes or events that we have going on. I invite you to reach out and email if you have any questions. Questions about this community, questions about me, questions about what we do, or questions about this science of mind and spirit, liberation theology that we practice and teach. And if by chance you find yourself seeking beloved community with other like-minded beings, even if you already belong, are a member of another community, church, or center, you are more than free to have multiple affiliations wherever you are fed and find community. You are invited. And lastly, feel free to click like, subscribe, and share this or any other message or announcements with others in your circle. And with that, much appreciation, love, and blessings. Enjoy the message. Namaste and greetings, and welcome to April. The theme this month, fertilizing our future. And today we are talking about enriching our soil of possibility. Just as a gardener tends to their soil to ensure a bountiful harvest, we must nurture our inner environment to realize our full potential. In our journey throughout life, cultivating a quote unquote fertile inner soil is essential. Say that word again with me. Is essential for personal, and actually, we'll go here. Essential for personal and spiritual growth of the individual, and collective and spiritual growth of the collective. It is necessary to explore how our past experiences, both those that are life affirming and non-life affirming, those challenges that are desired and those that are undesired, how all of these things can serve as valuable nutrients that enrich our lives. How do these experiences, all of these things, how do they serve to enrich the soil of our consciousness, where the seeds of our thoughts and intentions are able to take root and then grow? Note that for those who, do gardening and farming and whatnot, we understand that can serve to fertilize the earth. Ready? Okay. Enriching our soil of possibility. In order for us to dive deeper, we have to sort of clarify some terms to begin with. So let's start with, what does the word fertile mean? For something to be fertile, land, soil, producing or capable of producing abundant vegetation or crops. Now, as we're going through this, keep checking in. How does this, right, apply to our consciousness and our lives? So producing or capable of producing abundant experiences and conditions of body, mind, and soul, individually and collectively. Synonyms: potent, high yielding, fruitful, and lush. You clear here? Okay, next term to clarify. To fertilize, such as with an egg, to develop a new individual by introducing the male reproductive material. So we can think of the energy of yin and yang when they come into collective union, and then creation is birthed as a result, right? So what is the masculine energy, feminine energy that is creating or manifesting whatever the experience is? How are we making our consciousness and our life more fertile, more productive, by adding whatever the suitable substances are, the suitable practices to our lives, to our experiences? How do we fertilize our consciousness to make our consciousness more fertile in order to reap the benefit or to reap the harvest that we have sown? Now, in order to fertilize something, what do we typically use to fertilize? We use, at least in terms of plants, we use a fertilizer. Now, what is a fertilizer? Typically a chemical or substance, natural or chemical, that is added to the soil or the land, which increases the fertility of the land. So a chemical or natural substance that is added to. Okay? So once again, think about what is it that we are adding to our own lives that serves as a quote unquote fertilizer. Once again, a substance that is spread across the soil to make it more fertile, to enrich it. That's the key word we're going to focus on right here. To enrich it. What does it mean to enrich? To improve or enhance the quality or value of. To reinforce, to upgrade, to refine, to elevate, to deepen, to intensify. So once again, how are we enriching our consciousness, enriching our lives, enriching our relationships? How are we making all of these things more fertile? What is the fertilizer that we are using to do so? What are the active steps that we can take to nurture and to enrich our dreams, our goals, our desires, ensuring that they all have the right conditions in which to flourish? Note, what are the active steps? Not just theorizing, not just marinating on, not simply having an intention, but what are the active steps that we can take, that we can engage in? What are the behaviors that will bring this about? That's the key thing, behavior. Dr. Holmes says, like the creative soil in which seeds are planted and from which a plant grows, the soil of the universe is the creative medium into which the word of spirit falls and from which creation arises. The word of the spirit, or the word of spirit. What? Your thoughts and your words, your emotions and feelings, and your actions are the seeds that go into the universe of creative potential and possibilities. And from there, the womb of creation, comes the life experience. And we can look at any externalized life experience and trace it back to a point of consciousness. Doesn't matter if it's the thing that we call in the United States of America the era of slavery, where people were kidnapped and imprisoned against their will under the umbrella of. There's a consciousness that created this system. Jim Crow South, there's a consciousness that created this. Eugenics, there's a consciousness that created this. Because the same system that operated in the United States, Adolf borrowed, noticing how well it worked, and then created a system in Germany mirrored after the system he witnessed here. What is the consciousness? There were thoughts that went into the universe of this creative medium. There were words that went into, that fell into the law of mind and action. There were emotions and feelings, and there were behaviors and actions. That all of these things together, creation arose, a system arose, abuses arose, war arose. Everything can be traced back to the seed of creation, consciousness. So if that's how all of these things came into being, then are we allowing our consciousness, are we planting the seeds into the conscious soil of the universe to create a world that works for all? Universal health care, equity, belonging, the beloved community. Are we doing so collectively, and are we doing it individually? Because once again, in planting, the soil doesn't get to decide what's sown. The soil receives the seed, and it does what it does. So are we being mindful enough to know what seeds we are planting into the soil? While also being mindful that there's an energy that goes into this. As we said in the intro, looking at our past experiences. So suppose someone says, I have made a lot of mistakes in my life. I had opportunities I did not grasp. Every person has some feeling like this. At some point in their lives, we have all questioned and doubted and even blamed ourselves to a certain degree. This is a direct belief that there is but one opportunity which comes to each person. And if they do not take that opportunity when it knocks, they will have no more. This belief, this consciousness, is a belief in a limited universe of limited opportunities. And in order for us to truly manifest what we claim we want to manifest, this must be denied completely and specifically. It is not that we have made no mistakes, but if the belief in the necessity of mistakes stays in our consciousness, then there is bound to be a repetition of mistakes. Now, pause for a second before we go on to what else Dr. Holmes says. What is this saying in summary? Thoughts are creative. And if we truly believe that we, for example, if I say, as I once did, I can't do anything right, then subconsciously there is a self-fulfilling prophecy that I am going to be acting on, because that is the largest portion of the iceberg beneath the surface of the water. What we see is my lived experience. But beneath the surface, there's a lot of belief and paradigms and consciousness that are driving the part that we see. So if I believe lack and scarcity, there's not enough jobs, there's not enough money, there's not enough people to date or have a relationship with, there's no way someone would ever want to marry me, etc., etc., etc. Then once again, there is this consciousness. Subconsciously, my belief system is driving the behavior that then I'll pictures as, told you. There's the proof. So in order to change, I have to be specific in changing and saying, I understand that this is a limitless universe. And there are more than thousands, millions of potential people to date and potentially marry. The numbers are factual, mathematical evidence that prove it is possible. And then if I believe now, oh, it's possible, it starts to change how I show up. Because now when I show up at places and bowling and wherever I show up, I know that the number of people in this room are potential people to date, versus nobody in this room could ever like me. It changes when we change. Dr. Holmes goes on to say, it is scientific practice to declare that there have been no mistakes in one's consciousness, if there have been, they are now wiped out. So in other words, I made the mistakes then, they're not impacting me now. I failed that test then, it has nothing to do with now. The mistakes are what they are. They need not dictate or determine who we are at this point and going forward. There are none in the divine plan, that which is the infinite universe. And there is no plan for us other than the divine plan. To live and live abundantly is the divine plan. And in that plan, we may add checkbook wrong, etc., and not balance and bounce a check, etc., but that does not make us inherently, divinely wrong. So our invitation on the flip side of that is, how are we developing our ability to developing stewardship over our consciousness? over the 4 pillars of our mental equivalent? How are we developing the capacity and the practice to enrich, to fertilize, to make more fertile our lives, our dreams, our goals, etc., so that we then are able to reap the benefits of individually and collectively? There is a creative intelligence in the universe that acts exactly like the soil does physically, but it is a spiritual thing. It is a universal mind principle responding to us as law, operating upon our thoughts, cause our thoughts, our words, our emotions, and our behaviors. It is operating on all 4 of them. The way that we think, the way that we feel, the way that we speak, the way that we act. We do not know how or why exactly it reacts to us as it does, just like gravity. We may not know exactly why gravity does what it does, but we know it does it, and we accept it. We live accordingly by trusting what we know to be. The average person does not understand gravity. The gravitational pull of the Earth is based on an equation that says that most of us have no clue. But trust and believe, if there's a sheet of ice, we walk differently. We don't carelessly bound up or down steps because we know that we could fall gravity. So we act accordingly. Well, there is this spiritual law as well that we have the opportunity to act accordingly as well, to change how we think, speak, feel, emote, and act, knowing that this thing called the law is responding to us accordingly. Breathe. So earlier we were talking about fertilizers, and generally there are certain chemicals or certain numbers when you look at a bag of fertilizer that says, nitrogen is in the bag and this is what percentage, and phosphorus is in the, right? These chemicals are in the bag or in the container. But what if we didn't look at fertilizer in this way and we were looking at it as our own lives? What are the nutrients that fertilize you? What would the NPK for you be? What is nurturing you? What is the presence of and for you? What is kindness for you? What is now? What is practicing? What is knowing? For example, if we look at these, nurturing. What nurtures health and well-being for you? What nurtures your relationships? What nurtures gratefulness? What nurtures joy for you? What about now? How do you anchor into the present in a centered and focused manner? Not dwelling on the past or the future, but being in the present. What does it look like for you to practice mindfulness or meditation? For you to practice prayer in an effective higher level of stewardship, that is, because we may meditate and we may pray and whatnot, but are we doing so at the degree that is going to create what we say we want to create? And how are you practicing effective communication? How are these nutrients fertilizing your consciousness and benefiting you, and thereby the world? Dr. Holmes says, there is no mental coercion in using the law of mind, any more than there would be in using the creative law of the fertility of the soil. Imagine someone running out into their garden and having a conversation with the soil, trying to convince it to grow onions this year. But note, many people, when they pray to a God, begging and beseeching and bargaining in that same kind. Dear God, I promise I'll give up chocolate if you'll just give me this new job. Same idea. We plant a seed in this soil and it evolves a plant. To plant a seed of thought and then uproot it through doubts and denials and undue haste and anxiety is to neutralize our effort. Back in the days when I was a fundamental Christian, we would refer to this idea of once you place whatever it is on the altar for God, do not go back to the altar and take it off. Let God do what God can do. Same general idea. If I'm going to, have an idea for something and I'm like, okay, I'm going to audition for this play. I'm going to pray, do a spiritual mind treatment to successfully. Okay, but wait a minute. Am I good enough? I mean, I didn't get that last play. And, I'm probably too old for them to cast. They're looking for someone. Oh, and then blah, 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 blah. Self-fulfilling prophecy once again. I have undone the very thing I have affirmed to create this new affirmation of, yeah, that's not going to happen. Yeah, you're not good enough. Both are affirmations. One is life affirming and one is not. But they both do the same thing. The law receives them both equally, just like the soil receives carrots or onions. Doesn't judge, it receives the seed and it grows accordingly. So too does the law. Affirmation of, yes, I can. No, I can't. The law receives just the same. It would be like planting corn and then uprooting it every few days to see if the corn was in fact growing. We must learn to trust this law of growth, this law of evolution, this law of creative process, since it is a natural part of the great universal cosmic order of cause and effect. Do we trust it? Sigmund Freud says, out of your vulnerabilities will come your strength. Now, why did I put this here? Because it is precisely this idea of vulnerability that causes us to not trust. We don't want to be vulnerable. So we try to micromanage and control everything rather than trust the mystery, trust the unknown. In order to do so, we have to be vulnerable. And he is saying it is precisely in that space of being vulnerable that your strength comes. And the day came when the risk of remaining tight in a bud was far more painful than the risk it took to blossom. Many of us prefer to stay tight, to stay close, to stay closed off, not realizing it is causing great pain to do so. And yet, if we're going to truly do what this teaching is offering us to do, and we're going to create a world that works for all, and we're going to heal and transform, then we have to be willing to bloom. We have to be willing to open up. In order for us to truly live the lives that we say we want to live, then there needs to be sustainable growth, sustainable evolution, sustainable, whatever words we want to use, transformation. But what does sustainable growth or transformation require of each of us? It requires patience and consistent effort. You don't just jump out into the garden, throw some seeds into the air, watch them land on the ground, and then push a button, and then 30 seconds later, boof, I've got a garden. Boof, I've got a vegetable garden. I've got salad. Yay, it takes time. And different things gestate and grow at different rates. Patience. It takes time to till the soil, create the rows and space the seeds and to nurture them and water them. It takes time, patience, and consistent effort. Suppose each one of us goes out into an unknown country and works an acre of land. Now, there are 250 acres, so each one of us will take an acre in that same land. There are not 250 different kinds of creative processes in the soil, however. There is only one kind of creative process that is common to the entire 250 acres. But we are people. So each one of us plants their crop in their way, the way they like it and prefer it. Then everything is different when it comes up. And people who see it say, here are 250 individual acres of land. Because Ray planted corn, Tracy planted carrots, Deborah planted roses, Miranda planted cabbage, Michael planted oranges, etc. So people are like, oh, wow, look, 250 individual acres of land. Yeah, no. Because all of them, there is no such thing. Because all of them, there is no such thing. Because all of them, there are 250 individualized plots, but only one creative operating process in, through, and as the soil. There's no such thing as individual, no such thing. They all are operating under the same universal law. Now, the key is it works the exact same way with our subjective mind. Our creative process is exactly the same thing. There is really no such thing as what some psychologists have called your subjective mind as an individual thing. Each of these acres didn't have different kinds of, or they did have different kinds of plants, but there was only one operating principle in the soil. And it operated upon each of these different ideas to produce them. And it did so in the same fashion. It works the same way for our subjective mind. Every person, as a result of our thinking, subjectifies that thinking, or the whole mental equivalent process. It passes into what the subjective mind, or what we call the subjective mind, noting that the subjective mind in reality is a universal, creative, flowing process that flows through, in, as everything, and is currently in, through, and as, and surrounding all of us, and is reacting and responding to the thinking and feeling and speaking and actions of all of us. And it produces accordingly. And this is the core principle of this philosophy. Both the conscious and subconscious are mind. The part of the iceberg above and below aren't separate. It's one iceberg. Just because you see the conscious and you don't see the subconscious, they're both still present. They are both still operating. So keep in mind that when we say mind, or the mind principle, what we are talking about is how the universal is expressing in, through, and as the individual or the relative. How are you stewarding your mind, knowing that your mind is the one mind expressing as you? Because there is no the mind that is God, or God's mind, and Ray's mind. They're not two, they're one. Thoughts going into the subjective are like seeds. They act through the creative medium of mind and must have within themselves the full power to develop and express. But how could they express unless they were already known to mind? They could not. So mind must view the thought as already completed in the thing. And mind must also contain the avenue through which the idea is to be expressed. Every thought, sets the fulfillment of its desire into motion in mind, and mind sees the thing as already done. The apple seed is fully complete as an entire orchard of thousands upon thousands. It's already there. It's encoded in the seed. Well, it's no different than the seed of your thought or the seed of your idea. It's already encoded. The amen is already, as it says, it's already done. It's already encoded right there. Soon as that thought pops, that thought is already fully formed and existing in the mind that is God. Now, the question is, what are we going to do with that seed? Are we going to plant it in fertile soil, fertilize it and enrich the soil and nurture it and watch the seed bloom into a lived experience? Or are we going to pluck that seed out and throw in another one, mess up the soil, damage the seed? How are we stewarding this entire thing? Because it's important to remember in the process of gardening, we'll say, it's an ongoing. Remember what it said, patience and consistent. It's ongoing. The seed is rooted, it sprouts, a baby plant grows, an adult plant grows, it matures, and more seeds fall, and those seeds take root, and those seeds sprout, and so on, and so on, and so on. It's the same way with our thoughts, our ideas, our dreams, our fantasies. The seed is planted. It sprouts, it grows, it matures. We experience the full bloom of it. We harvest it, and then we repeat the process. And some of us, the process we are repeating is we plant the seed or the idea of, I'm so broken, no one can love me. And we watch that come to full maturation as the evidence of, I'm broken and no one will ever love me. And then we replant seeds and the process continues. Because once again, life affirming or non-life affirming, there's no judgment. They both are received into the soil, and the soil responds accordingly. The negative use of the creative power of thought, then, is a very real thing, and indeed is at the root of all of our troubles. And while we persist in believing that evil is as real as good, we shall experience the evil in which we believe. Self-fulfilling prophecy. So while we persist in thinking and acting as though limitation were the law of life, then we shall continue to exist in bondage. To free ourselves from the contemplation of evil and bondage, projecting as it does the forms of lack and scarcity, unhappiness, physical disease, etc., is the whole aim and purpose of the science of mind and spirit, to free ourselves from the contemplation of the belief in and the existence within evil and bondage, to free ourselves. This is why I and people like Reverend Dr. David Alexander and a few others say that this teaching is in fact a liberation theology. Dr. Holmes says right here, this is the whole aim and purpose of the science of mind and spirit, to free ourselves, liberate ourselves, emancipate ourselves from the contemplation of that which we call evil and all of its lack and scarcity and all the things that fall into that and bondage that, as Joel Goldsmith says, ensnare us. We are to be free from it in order to truly live our lives, the divine order, to live fully, to express fully. You can give without loving, but you can never love without giving. Freedom. When we are able to truly love, we can't help but to give whatever is needed, to be the good Samaritan. Because love, for lack of a better word, love commands us to. In the same way that if I try to hold my breath, after a certain amount of time, my body is going to command me to breathe. The urge to breathe is so strong that the body will demand it. It will gasp to take in that breath. Love is the same way. And when we fully are immersed in it, then we have no choice but to give of it and from it. And going back to the idea of patience, Andy Rooney says, everyone wants to live at the top of the mountain. Everyone wants enlightenment. Everyone wants, bliss and joy, but all of the happiness and growth and enlightenment occurs while you are climbing. It's not the destination. It's the journey. It's the cultivation. It's the sowing and the nurturing and the reaping and the repeat. The Science of Mind and Spirit 4.0 offers us the tools and the techniques to sow into the law, not only the life-affirming bounty of a life that works for and serves us, but a bounty that serves and works for all. In other words, a world that works for all. That's what love does. It serves, it gives. Science of Mind and Spirit 4.0 offers us a nutrient-rich theology of liberation that feeds us in ways that benefit us physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, socially, and financially. As is said, you can lead a horse to water, but you cannot make it drink. So too, we can be led to the science of mind and spirit, but we must consciously choose to partake of the wisdom, the teaching, and the practices to do them and drink. Breathe. This week's affirmation, our declaration, I will say it first, and if it resonates with you, I invite you to say it with me the second time I say it. I enrich my soil of possibilities, nurturing a fertile ground for my dreams to grow and flourish. Together. I enrich my soil of possibilities, nurturing a fertile ground for my dreams to grow and flourish. So it is. So it is. This week's journal questions or Thursday night study group questions. Number 1, what am I sowing? What am I reaping? How am I tending the field of my consciousness? Number 2, what do I do to nourish and sustain all areas of my life by enriching the soil of infinite possibilities? Number 3, how vulnerable do I allow myself to be? How does being vulnerable benefit me, nourish, sustain me? Number 4, it jumped to 5, so number 4. What past and present experiences am I using as fertilizer to enrich my life now and going forward? What beep have I turned to medicine? And lastly, how effective of a steward am I in all of those areas, physically, mentally, etc.? How can I increase my effectiveness? And we breathe and enter into that space of the infinite knowing, that space of creative possibilities, that space where we know and know that we know. And in this space, we allow the seed of our thought and the seed of our word and the seed of our emotions and feelings to fuel our actions that sow further seeds. We choose to be the very demonstration of prayer in action. There is no separation between. Just as the story of the acres, there is no separation between 1 acre and another acre and another acre in terms of how the soil operates. The only separation is the man-made delineated lines of this is my acre and that is your acre. But the earth, the soil, the creative process exists throughout it all. So in the same way, we understand and we anchor into this that there is no separation between our thoughts and our words, our emotions and our actions. All of them are a divine way that the universe is expressing and showing itself in, through, and as us. Our thoughts, the universe's thoughts, our words, God's words, our emotions and feelings, spirit's emotions and feelings, and our actions, the infinite actions of love and law. There is no separation. There is only infinite oneness. The thing that we say amen is how we live our lives. What are we saying amen to? In this moment, we decide, we choose to say amen to a world that works for all. Amen to health and well-being. Amen to joy and laughter and love. Amen to peace on earth, goodwill to all. Amen. 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 And so we breathe, allowing the energy of and the power of and the presence of the amen to move in, through, and as us. That simply entering a room, the amen of who and what we are is felt by everyone in the room. And our amen awakens their amen. And when two and more touch and agree, yes, peace on earth, nothing will deny its experience and its expression. So we breathe, knowing that the creative law, the soil of consciousness, receives and acts accordingly. We trust it, we use it, we know it, we are it. In this relative, individualized expression, it is operating because there is no separation between what God is and what we are. As Joel Goldsmith says, God expresses God, and that expression appears as you. Breathe. And so it is. Whew. Namaste and blessings, everyone. This being our first Sunday of the month, you are invited to join us for fellowship on Zoom. If you're joining in, I will see you there. And if not, I will see you somewhere during the week or right back here next Sunday. Blessings, be well, and know that you are loved.